I've got with me on the line from Bristol in the UK, James McKeown. Hello, James.
Hey, Dwayne.
And Aiden Searle.
That's correct.
Now, you guys are part of the band High Fiction Science, based, as I said, in Bristol. What kind of music comes out of Bristol in the UK?
Well, I guess the kind of the most obvious bands are seen as the Bristol legacy, are kind of the trip hop kind of scene. So your Massive Attack, Portishead, those kind of names, Tricky, people like that. But I think that's the problem, that we get kind of stereotyped that that's the only type of music coming out, and I guess our music falls into kind of a bit more of a kind of post-punk, art rock kind of sound, which probably harks back to some of the earlier Bristol bands, which are kind of things like the Pop Group.
And the Blue Aeroplanes, for example.
Yeah.
I've got to say that when I heard the album for the first time, I wasn't thinking post-rock so much as krautrock. There were quite a few krautrock elements in there.
Yeah, I think that's the common ground, which I think the three core members of the band are other kraut bands such as Can and Noi, and less obvious bands,
Yeah,
Harmonia, etc.
that's right. I think that was the kind of the initial kind of sound we sort of that drew us all together, and we wanted to try and emulate initially. We kind of developed then and arrived more at our own sound. But we still use that as kind of a backbone to what we do. And then obviously we wanted to kind of fuse that with the vocals of Maria, which are kind of very sort of classic kind of English folky kind of sound. So we thought that would be a kind of slightly unusual combination, but which might work.
Well, reading the media releases and reviews calling you psych folk, I love terms like that, so instantly captured me. But rather than the krautrock bands like Can and Noi, I was immediately comparing you in my mind to Armandul because of the female vocals. I don't know whether you agree with me on that.
Yeah, I mean, probably I suppose that would be a more obvious connection in terms of vocally. But I think in terms of a sort of a sonic palette that we use, I suppose probably less like Can and Noi, but probably more like sort of Cluster or Harmonia, that kind of sound. Even sort of early Kraftwerk as well. We like to try and get that kind of element of sort of electronica in there, and sort of fuse that as well. So I suppose Amon Duel, something like that would be the obvious comparison, but I see us probably harking more towards the other bands.
So you guys have been together since 2008-ish. Give me a brief history of High Fiction Science.
Okay, so I sort of had initial jams with Jeff Green, our bass player. Jeff was in a band, an earlier Bristol band called Suncoil Sect. That album's still out there, and it's probably well worth checking out their debut album.
It's on Rocket Recordings.
That's it, yeah. So I had some initial jams with Jeff. We then brought in Matt to do sort of keyboards and electronica. We had a previous drummer that was kind of very sort of jazz rock based, and he left us, and then we drafted in Aiden. And that pretty much became the core band that we've got today. And Aiden's style was much more kind of clipped and controlled and fit very well with that kind of motoric template of the krautrock music that we wanted to emulate. And then later on, so obviously then we were kind of initially sort of instrumental, and then we got drafted in Maria, that came in from another Bristol band called Fuzz Against Junk, who were fairly prolific. And as I say, that kind of vocal style that she brought was very much more sort of pure and kind of ethereal, and so we wanted to then fuse those two styles together, and that's pretty much ended up with so the logical step was to try and write some material, record the album, and get that released ourselves, and that's pretty much where we are now.
I've got to say the track that stood out to me was one called Cosmonaut. Talk to me about that.
That kind of started with one of my kind of dub Afrobeat inspired drum patterns, and I think it all developed from there, really.
I mean,
it's one of the first things we wrote together as a band, actually, when I first started playing with James and Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of, a lot of those songs initially were just born of sort of jams, and as I say, Aiden sort of came up with this amazing sort of off-kilter kind of Afrobeat rhythm, which again sort of reflected a lot of music that can obviously, as a krautrock band, they were very influenced by kind of world music as well, and sort of very early protagonists of that. And again, we sort of jumped on that and kind of used that as a sort of strong instrumental track. And I think that gives us kind of quite a unique sound. And we played that for a long time just as an instrumental, and then Jeff came up with some words for Maria to put over that, and we didn't want to. It didn't really suit an obvious kind of broken down song structure with a classic vocal. We wanted something slightly different to go over the top of that, which almost sounded like a kind of a sort of sample, if you like. And in fact, in the studio, we ran that through a sort of filter to make it sound like it was coming through like an old sort of crackly old radio kind of thing. So which again is sort of a classic thing that Can would do with the kind of shortwave radio and that kind of thing that they would put into their songs. So slightly more experimental, but still quite accessible, I think.
When I listen to records for the first time, I can't help but in my mind compare the sounds to other music that I've heard, and I've already said that you've reminded me a little bit of Armandul, and there are elements of Joy Division in there as well. When reviewers say things like that, do you find that a little bit offensive, or do you find it complimentary?
No, it's not offensive at all. I find it complimentary, and it's nice to know that other people recognise your own reference points. It's good.
Yeah, it's certainly positive. I mean, obviously, sometimes people do miss the mark with where they think we're going. But I think a lot of the times, we're certainly someone like Joy Division, where Jeff's bass playing style is certainly reminiscent in parts of Peter Hook, and also I guess as a guitarist, I like to try and be not like your kind of classic riffing, big riffs, guitarist. I'm much more minimal, much more about texture and things like that, which clearly those bands were sort of very much playing in that kind of style as well. So no, it's great when people spot those kind of references. And
you were mentioning to me earlier too, James, that a guitarist that you really admire at the moment is Stephen Wilson, and you've got, with the 6 Degrees of Separation, pretty close with supporting bands like North Atlantic Oscillation.
Absolutely, that was clearly part of my game plan. Yeah, absolutely. And that was great to do a gig with them, because that kind of sort of modern progressive sound that they've come up with is really fits with the sort of style of music that we're trying to do, which is kind of taking some sort of classic sort of early templates, I suppose, but then bringing them a bit more up to date. So that was a logical conclusion to play with a band like that. And I'm a massive fan of Stephen Wilson. Passed copies of the album on to him at various signings and things like that. But I'm sure the guy gets inundated with stuff. So, but I'm a big fan, and I'm loving his recent solo album as well, Grace for Drowning. That's fabulous.
Yes, and you're probably in a very enviable position to me here, sitting all the way on the other side of the world. You probably had the opportunity to see him.
Yeah, several times. Yeah, that's right. Both solo and with Porcupine Tree. So and obviously met the guy a couple of times. It's brilliant. Even down to the point, I don't want to set myself up as too much of a geek, but even down to the fact that I play a PRS, which was influenced by that, and taking on board his sort of musical knowledge and his recording techniques and the instruments that he uses and the sound that he arrives at kind of made me think, PRS is probably a good sort of guitar to play.
Is there much of a progressive scene in Bristol?
Not massively. I mean, you've got obviously another KScope band, Pineapple Thief. I think they're based in kind of Exeter or somewhere, which is not too far from where we are. No, I mean, it's not really a massive scene. I suppose a lot of the bands that we've sort of got more of an affinity with maybe come from like sort of slightly more experimental or space rock kind of arena, something like that. But probably less of a proggy sound. And I certainly wouldn't want to paint us as being really a band that's influenced specifically by that. I mean, I certainly am personally, but the other guys have got a whole range of tastes that don't just fit into that bracket. So I wouldn't class us as that sort of genre, but it's an interesting scene and one that I'm a fan of, definitely.
Is prog a genre though? I always like to think of prog as being something that doesn't fit in any other genre.
I completely agree, and there's so many different shades of that. No, you're absolutely right, and it would be foolish to try and sort of pinpoint that. And so, yeah, if we can be, I guess if we can be as sort of open-minded about it as clearly you are, then yeah, I'd like to fit into that where you see progressive can cover a band from, from a krautrock band to Radiohead to, your obvious sort of Pink Floyd or whatever. So yeah, I think you're right. It can be all-encompassing, but I think the problem is obviously lazy journalism would kind of maybe, if you say prog, they're going to run a mile because they'll think you're, a Yes tribute band or something. So that's the danger that we've got there, I suppose.
So are you doing many shows at the moment?
At the moment, we've kind of put that on hold slightly because we're just focusing on writing some new material, which we're hoping to get recorded or start recording early next year. So yeah, the first we're going to do a couple of gigs in sort of January, February time next year. But really, the emphasis is on just trying to get this new material written and recorded, well, demoed at this stage and then recorded.
I notice your own label is called Negative Drive. Is that a reference to Red Dwarf by any chance?
No, it's not. No, it's the reference actually comes from Howard Devoto from
Magazine.
From Magazine. Yeah. That was an early kind of. I think the whole ethos behind that was reading the Simon Reynolds book. Gave me the Rip It Up and Start Again. Gave me that insight into that. And basically, what he was saying was by negative drive, he meant the fact that sort of everyone around you is kind of almost pushing against you and not really giving you a chance to push your creativity out there. And because of that negative response that you get, it kind of drives you forward to do it and to actually continue against all adversity to sort of put your creativity into it and express it and put it out there anyway. So yeah, it's a funny description, but what we meant by that was we're driven by the fact that we need to. We're doing this ourselves. There's no sort of big record label behind us, no machinery. It's all off our own back, and it has resulted in some good things, like some airplay on BBC Six Music, on some quite prolific shows on there. So yeah, that was the whole thinking behind that. I'm not really a Red Dwarf fan, to be honest.
Yes, I was going to say a little bit of a deeper explanation than Red Dwarf.
I like to think so, yeah.
All right, thanks guys for chatting with me. It's been great to talk, and looking forward to the new material.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll keep you posted.
Yeah, it's just developing well, and we hope to get it out at some point in 2011.
Yeah,
12. I mean,
2012. Yeah, probably the best thing is just keep an eye on our sort of Facebook pages and our activity online, and we'll post updates on there as soon as we've got something you can listen to.
Yeah, a lot of bands have their full albums streaming online now. Have you got that with your material?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, you can stream the whole album from our Bandcamp site. So it's just Bandcamp highfiction www.highfictionscience.bandcamp.com. There's a couple of tracks there you can download for free as a taster. Full tracks, full resolution quality, and then you can stream the album from there, and obviously buy it as a download. And also you can buy a physical copy if you're like me and you want the real thing.
Speaking of the physical copy, I meant to mention that earlier. A very retro look to the cover there.
Yeah, that's right. It's a great piece of design by a good friend of ours, Johnny Rocket, who runs Rocket Recordings. That's classic of his style, but the actual tower on the cover is a very kind of iconic landmark in Bristol. It's an old telecommunications tower. Then you can kind of look over all of the city from that vantage point, and it's quite a kind of sort of dystopian image that we wanted to portray on the cover. So that was very much our idea, that we said to him as a brief, we want that featured in some way, and then he came up with that. And again, the back cover features some sort of Bristol landmarks as well. And we're really proud of our heritage and where we come from, and wanting to express that and say, hey, look, this is coming from this city, and this is a reflection of who we are. So yeah, he did us proud and came up with a good cover.
Yeah, it's always good to hold the real thing. Thanks again, guys. Much appreciated.
No worries,
Thanks.
Thanks for your help. Cheers.